Hello and welcome back. I'm Dr. Quirós-Alcalá, and in this lecture, we will begin by exploring the broader landscape of the U.S. workforce. This is to provide essential context before we dive into where vulnerable workers are employed and who they are. Here are the learning objectives for this module. Now, we will move on to talk about the U.S. workforce. First, I want to note some workforce characteristics that are important in the context of vulnerable worker populations, not just in the United States. While this course primarily focuses on the U.S. workforce, many workplace challenges discussed are not unique to the United States. Many of these issues exist in other countries, though they may be more pronounced in developing nations with fewer resources and less robust labor protections. So, important characteristics related to the workforce include where workers are employed in terms of location. So, that might be geographic, for example. And in general, it's also important to know what the occupations are of the workers that concern us. Where do they work? So what industries or sectors are employed in? What is the age distribution of the workforce? And demographics such as gender, ethnic makeup, and other characteristics, including skill level needed for a given workplace, be it in the industrial, service, agricultural sector, or in unskilled labor, which would be important in terms of some of the jobs that we will consider in this course. We will also be talking about whether jobs are full-time, part-time, or perhaps ones which contingent workers hold. And finally, whether or not workers have disabilities, and if so, what is the nature of those disabilities and the extent to which they exist. All of these factors can play a role in increasing occupational risk among vulnerable workers, as we will learn in this course. Now, let's become familiar with some of the workforce demographics in the United States. So in the United States, the workforce is generally characterized and measured by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, or BLS. The Bureau of Labor Statistics is a federal agency within the United States Department of Labor that was established in 1884. It serves as a principal fact-finding agency in the field of labor economics and statistics and is a key component of the U.S. federal statistical system. The BLS is responsible for collecting, analyzing, and disseminating essential data related to the labor market activity, working conditions, price changes, and productivity in the U.S. economy to the public, employers, researchers, and government organizations to support public and private decision-making. Some of the key functions of the BLS include data collection, in which the BLS gathers information through various surveys, including the Current Population Survey, or CPS, and the National Compensation Survey. The Current Population Survey is a monthly survey that is used to determine rates of work, rates of employment and unemployment, and changes among those rates, in addition to specific changes according to demographic characteristics and specific industries or sectors. So a lot of the statistics presented in this course are based on data from the Current Population Survey. The BLS also produces critical economic indicators such as a Consumer Price Index and Producer Price Index, which measure inflation. And it also publishes numerous reports that provide insights into labor market conditions, including employment statistics, wage data, and productivity measures. Throughout this course, we will be mentioning different statistics published by the BLS, so it is encouraged that you always refer to the BLS website for the latest and most current statistics related to the U.S. workforce. So the labor force is one of the terms that you need to become familiar with for this course. The U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics defines the labor force as all individuals who are not institutionalized, not members of the armed forces, are at least 16 years of age, and may be either employed or unemployed. So how does the BLS determine if individuals are employed or unemployed? Well, in the Current Population Survey that we mentioned before, the employed worker is considered one who meets any of the following criteria. And this includes having worked at least 1 hour for pay or profit within the past week, which is also known as a week of reference or the reference week, as a wage or salaried worker or a self-employed, as well as those who are temporarily absent from their job, business, or farm, whether or not they are paid for the time off due to issues such as illness, being on vacation, or in the middle of a labor dispute, as well as those who worked without pay for a minimum of 15 hours in a business or farm owned by a family member. Now, for unemployed, the Current Population Survey classifies someone as unemployed if they meet all of the following criteria, including not being employed during the survey reference week, but engaged in looking for a job within the last 4 weeks. They were available for work during the survey reference week, except for temporary illness. They made at least one specific active effort to find a job during the 4-week period ending with the survey reference week. or they were temporarily laid off and expecting to be recalled to their job. All others would be considered not in the labor force. So ultimately, we have two populations, one being those in the labor force and others not in the labor force, which is related to the importance of our understanding of the work situation of the vulnerable worker. So how many workers are in the U.S. labor force? Well, this figure shows the civilian labor force participation rate from 2004 to 2024 based on data from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, or BLS. The labor force participation rate is defined as a number of people ages 16 and older who are employed or actively seeking employment, divided by the total non-institutionalized civilian working age population. And we can see that the labor force participation rate has been steadily increasing since the COVID-19 pandemic. Specifically, we saw an estimated 3% increase from 2020 to 2024. The shaded areas in this figure represent periods of recessions as determined by the National Bureau of Economic Research, and we can see that, as expected, the total labor force participation rate dips during these periods of recession. Now, by race and ethnicity, the U.S. labor force participation rate is highest for individuals who self-identify as Hispanic or Latino, followed by Asian, Black, and finally white. From this figure, we can also see that Asians are increasing most rapidly in rate in the U.S. workforce. By sex, data from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics indicates that since 2004, the labor force participation rate is higher among men compared to women, and since 2016, the unemployment rate in the U.S. has been around 4%, with the exception of during the COVID-19 pandemic when the unemployment rate was estimated to be around 15%. Now, in terms of projections, the labor force participation rate is still expected to be higher among men compared to women and projected to decrease slightly by 2033. According to the United States Bureau of Labor Statistics, among women, it is Black women that have the highest labor force participation rate, and in terms of projections, the labor force participation rate is expected to decrease slightly by 2032, though these trends among women are similar by race and ethnicity compared to data from previous years. Among men, it is Hispanic men who have the highest labor force participation rate. The labor force participation rate among men is expected to decrease slightly by 2032, but similar trends among men by race and ethnicity are projected for 2032. Now, in terms of the labor force participation rates by age, we see that for both 2022 and projections for 2032, that the highest labor participation rate is among individuals who are between 25 to 54 years of age, which is considered the prime age for working. For women, the participation rate in 2032 is projected to increase among those 45 years of age and up, while the opposite is true for men compared to data from 2022. The projected increase in the number of total women in the labor force will be driven by women over the age of 25. Overall, the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics projects that total employment will grow from about 168 million in 2023 to about 175 million in 2033, an increase of 4%. While the total employment growth is projected to be slower than the 13.7% increase recorded over the 2013-2023 decade, this lower employment growth is a result of an expected slowdown in civilian, non-institutional population growth and subsequently slower labor force growth. This total projected employment growth is heavily influenced by demographic trends, such as the aging U.S. population and slower growth in the civilian, non-institutional population, that are expected to cause slower labor force growth and declining labor force participation rates over the projection period. This concludes this section of the lecture, and as a reminder, it is strongly encouraged that you always check the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics website for the most current and up-to-date statistics and information related to the U.S. workforce.